They replaced me with someone who claimed she could read the energy field of servers. I wasn't fired for making mistakes. I was fired for not vibrating at the right frequency. She called me an energetic blockage. I called myself the creator of their entire system. I didn't retaliate with fire. I retaliated with logic and deleted everything they didn't deserve to keep. My name is Harper Quinn. I'm 37 years old. And until 3 weeks ago, I was the chief architect of Centra, a $65 million AI system at Lucid Pathworks. For 14 years, I built, nurtured, and perfected that system. I was once called the technological backbone of the company. Now, apparently, I'm a vibrational mismatch according to a woman who walks barefoot through our server rooms to feel the data streams. Let me take you back to when things first started to unravel. It was a Tuesday morning in Portland. Rain tapped against the floor-to-ceiling windows of our conference room as I led the sprint review for Centra's latest version. My team of engineers was presenting optimization improvements that would reduce processing time by 17.3% across our global logistics prediction model. If we implement these changes, we can save our clients approximately $4.2 million in cumulative shipping costs over the next quarter. I explained, highlighting the metrics on my presentation. The room hummed with the comfortable silence of professionals absorbing technical information, the kind of quiet I'd always appreciated. Then that silence was broken by the sharp scent of sandalwood incense wafting through the air conditioning system. The conference room door opened, and in walked our CEO, Marcus Bennett, alongside a willowy woman dressed entirely in white linen, her bare feet padding silently across our polished concrete floors. Harper, team, I'd like to introduce Astrid Moonfall, Marcus announced with an enthusiasm I'd rarely seen him display for actual technological breakthroughs. Astrid is joining us as our new organizational energy alignment specialist. I remember blinking several times, certain I'd misheard him. In my 14 years in tech, from startup environments to corporate giants, I'd never encountered such a job title. Astrid smiled serenely at the room, her wrists jangling with an assortment of crystals and beaded bracelets. "I'm so honored to join this energy matrix," she whispered, somehow projecting her voice enough for everyone to hear. "I can already sense the vibrational patterns of your digital ecosystem." Marcus beamed beside her as if she'd just announced the cure for cancer. "Astrid brings a new vision to Lucid Pathworks. She'll help us align our technological development with the universal flow." I glanced around the room, expecting to see the same bewilderment I felt reflected on my colleagues' faces. Instead, I saw a mixture of curiosity and, most concerningly, reverent nodding. "We were just discussing the optimization metrics for version 4.7, I said, attempting to redirect the meeting back to tangible reality. "We've achieved a significant reduction in processing time that translates to substantial client savings." Astrid closed her eyes and raised her palms. "But at what energetic cost? Harper numbers can blind us to the harmonic resonance of systems. May I?" Without waiting for permission, she glided to the center of the room and began slowly rotating, arms outstretched. "I sense," she murmured, "a blockage in the northeastern corner of your data architecture, a resistance to flow, rigidity where there should be fluid adaptation." I fought to keep my expression neutral. "Our Northeast data cluster handles critical supply chain predictions. It's designed for stability and consistency. Stability can become stagnation when the energy isn't properly channeled." Astrid interrupted, her eyes still closed. "We need to introduce more intuitive elements into your system's core." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "This is exactly why I brought Astrid in. We've been too rigid in our thinking, too bound by conventional methods. Astrid will help us transcend these limitations." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I'd seen tech fads come and go, AI winters, blockchain fever, VR manias, but this was something altogether different. This wasn't even pseudoscience, it was pure mysticism infiltrating a company built on logic and empirical results. "With all due respect," I said carefully, "Centra processes millions of data points to optimize global supply chains. It's built on mathematical models and machine learning algorithms. There's no place for intuition in its architecture." Astrid finally opened her eyes, fixing them directly on me. Every system has an energetic signature, Harper, even artificial ones. Especially artificial ones. They absorb the intentions of their creators. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I sense your energy is very structured, very linear. But the universe rarely moves in straight lines. Several engineers nodded, as if what she'd said made perfect sense. Marcus clapped his hands together. Well, I think this is a perfect time to integrate Astrid's insights into our development process. Harper, please make sure Astrid is included in all upcoming architectural decisions for Centra. And just like that, my carefully planned sprint review was derailed by a woman who believed she could psychically communicate with our AI system. Over the next few weeks, Astrid's influence grew like a digital fungus throughout Lucid Pathworks. Conference rooms were rearranged according to energy flow principles. Mandatory meditation sessions appeared on everyone's calendars. Departments were reorganized based on astrological compatibility rather than functional efficiency. But most alarmingly, Astrid began inserting herself into technical decisions regarding Centra, our crown jewel. Our primary product, the system that managed global supply chains for Fortune 500 companies. We need to introduce more heart-centered coding into the prediction algorithms, she suggested during one development meeting. The system is too cerebral. It needs to feel the flow of goods, not just calculate them. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Centra doesn't feel anything. It's a sophisticated machine learning model that optimizes logistical efficiency based on historical data and predictive analytics. That's the old paradigm thinking, Astrid countered with a pitying smile. All systems have consciousness on some level. We're just not attuning to it properly. What infuriated me most wasn't just the pseudoscientific nonsense, it was how eagerly my colleagues embraced it. People with advanced degrees in computer science and mathematics were suddenly discussing the emotional intelligence of our databases and how planetary alignments might affect processing speeds. My only ally was our CTO, Richard Chen, who had hired me 14 years ago when Lucid Pathworks was just a promising startup. Richard would catch my eye during these increasingly bizarre meetings and give me the slightest headshake. A silent acknowledgement of the madness unfolding around us. Just humor them for now. He advised me privately after a particularly frustrating session where Astrid had suggested we cleanse our servers with burning sage. Marcus is going through something. It'll pass. But it didn't pass. If anything, it intensified. One morning, I arrived to find Astrid leading a group of engineers in a code-blessing ritual before a major deployment. They stood in a circle around a laptop, eyes closed, as Astrid waved a feather over the keyboard, chanting something about digital harmony and binary transcendence. I watched, horrified, as Jake Chen, a brilliant MIT graduate who had once built a fault-tolerant distributed system from scratch, reverently repeated Astrid's chants. "Jake," I hissed, pulling him aside afterward. "What are you doing? You're a scientist, for God's sake." Jake looked at me with something like pity. "Harper, I know it seems unconventional, but I've never felt more connected to my code. After Astrid's alignment sessions, I'm writing more elegantly than ever. Your code efficiency has dropped by 22% since these alignment sessions began," I countered, showing him the metrics on my tablet. "Look at the actual data, Jake." He merely smiled. "Not everything valuable can be measured, Harper." Coming from a software engineer whose job literally involved measuring everything, this statement was so absurd I didn't even know how to respond. The situation reached a critical point when Astrid began requesting high-level access to Centra's core architecture, the secure, proprietary heart of our entire business. "I need to perform a deep energy scan of the system," she explained in a meeting with Marcus, Richard, and me. "I sense there are blockages in the foundational code that are preventing Centra from reaching its full intuitive potential." "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "The core architecture contains proprietary algorithms and client data protected by strict confidentiality agreements. No one accesses it without proper authorization and a legitimate technical need." Astrid tilted her head, studying me as if I were a particularly stubborn child. "Harper, Your protective energy around Sentra is becoming problematic. You're treating it like your child rather than a living system that needs to evolve. It's not a living system, I replied through gritted teeth. It's a complex technology that manages billions of dollars in global commerce. And yes, I am protective of it because I built it from the ground up. And I understand better than anyone the implications of making unauthorized changes to its architecture. Marcus frowned. Harper, I think you're being unnecessarily rigid here. Astrid has unique insights that could benefit Sentra in ways we haven't considered. She has 0 technical qualifications. I pointed out. No computer science background, no experience in AI or machine learning, no understanding of the complex systems that make Sentra function. Granting her access would violate our security protocols and potentially compromise client data. I don't need conventional qualifications to read energy signatures, Astrid said softly. My abilities transcend traditional education. I turned to Richard, expecting support from the technical leader of our company, but Richard avoided my gaze, suddenly very interested in his coffee mug. I think, he said carefully, that we should perhaps consider a limited access protocol for Astrid, under supervision, of course. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Richard had always been the voice of reason, the technical purist who insisted on evidence-based decisions. Richard, this goes against everything we've built here, I said, unable to keep the betrayal from my voice. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was defeat. Things change, Harper. We need to adapt. The meeting ended with Marcus instructing me to create a special access protocol for Astrid. I left feeling like I'd stepped into some alternate reality where scientific principles had been abandoned for mystical whimsy. That afternoon, Richard stopped by my office. He closed the door behind him, which was unusual. We'd always maintained an open-door policy at Lucid. I'm leaving, he said without preamble. I stared at him. What, you can't be serious? I've given my notice. 2 weeks. He looked tired, older than his 57 years. I need to step back and reevaluate my path. You're using her language now. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. What happened to the Richard who lectured us about data integrity and empirical evidence? He sighed heavily. I'm tired, Harper. I've been fighting battles like this for 30 years, and sometimes you just have to recognize when the tide has turned. Marcus is the CEO. It's his company now. It's our company, I insisted. We built it together. You, me, the original team. We created something valuable, something real. Are you really going to walk away and let it be turned into some kind of tech mysticism cult? Richard's expression softened. You've always been the purist, Harper, the true believer. I admired that about you. He paused. Just be careful. The atmosphere is changing here, and I'm not sure your approach is going to serve you well. After Richard left, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the rain against my office window. 14 years of my life had gone into Lucid Pathworks and Sentra. I'd missed family events, sacrificed relationships, worked nights and weekends to build something I believed in. The thought of walking away from it was inconceivable. But the thought of staying and watching it be dismantled by pseudoscience was equally unbearable. The following week, Richard was gone, departed with a strange, incense-heavy ceremony where Astrid had everyone form a circle and release his energy back to the universe. No traditional farewell happy hour, no reminiscing about his contributions, just mystical platitudes about soul journeys and new vibrational planes. With Richard gone, my isolation intensified. Astrid's influence expanded rapidly, and I found myself increasingly sidelined from decisions regarding Sentra, the very system I had architected. During a development meeting, I presented data showing that recent changes implemented under Astrid's guidance had reduced system efficiency by 31%. These numbers are concerning, I explained, displaying graphs that clearly showed the decline. The intuition-based decision matrices Astrid suggested are creating inconsistencies in the prediction models. Clients are starting to notice delays. Astrid, seated at Marcus's right hand, merely smiled. Sometimes systems need to destabilize before they can reach a higher order of functioning, like a caterpillar dissolving before becoming a butterfly. We're not running a butterfly sanctuary, I retorted. We're running a critical infrastructure system that companies rely on for their operations. This isn't about philosophical transformation, it's about delivering the service our clients pay for. Marcus frowned. Harper, I'm concerned about your negative energy lately. You seem resistant to the new direction we're taking. I'm resistant to watching a perfectly functioning system being degraded by unscientific interventions, I said, struggling to maintain my composure. Perhaps, Astrid suggested in her perpetual whisper, Harper would benefit from our advanced energy alignment sessions. I sense a great deal of blockage in her professional chakra. Several colleagues nodded in agreement, looking at me with concern, as if I were the one who had lost touch with reality. I don't need my chakras aligned, I said flatly. I need people to pay attention to actual data and make decisions based on evidence rather than magical thinking. The room fell silent. Marcus's expression hardened. Harper, that's enough. I think you should take the rest of the day off to reflect on your approach. And starting tomorrow, the alignment sessions will be mandatory for you. I left the meeting seething with frustration. Back in my office, I pulled up Centra's core diagnostics, reviewing the changes that had been implemented over the past month. The results were even worse than I'd presented. The intuitive elements Astrid had insisted on introducing were creating cascade failures throughout the system. Prediction accuracy had fallen from 97.3% to 81.9%, a catastrophic decline for a system managing global supply chains. As I was documenting these issues, a junior developer named Zoe slipped into my office. She closed the door quietly behind her and approached my desk, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Harper, she said in a low voice, I thought you should see this. She placed a folded piece of paper on my desk. They're planning to push you out. Soon. You should prepare. Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me staring at the note. I unfolded it to find a screenshot of an email thread between Marcus and HR, discussing the transition plan for my role. The language was carefully couched in corporate euphemisms, but the intent was clear. I was being removed, and Astrid would be taking over spiritual oversight of Centra's development. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, weighing my options. I could gather evidence of Centra's declining performance, appeal to the board, try to make a case based on hard data. But the board had already shown their support for Marcus's visionary leadership, praising the company's new, holistic approach to technology. I could leave voluntarily, take my expertise elsewhere, where it would be valued. But the thought of abandoning Centra, my creation, to be mutilated by Astrid's mystical meddling was physically painful. At 3 a.m., I made myself a cup of strong coffee and opened my personal laptop. I still had access to Centra's systems for now. I began reviewing the codebase, examining what had been changed and what damage had been done. What I found was worse than I'd feared. Critical fail-safes had been disabled in the name of allowing the system more intuitive freedom. Security protocols had been weakened to create more permeable energy boundaries. And buried in the commit logs was something that made my blood run cold: preparations to migrate Centra's core to a new architecture, one that would essentially lobotomize its precision in favor of emotionally intelligent decision-making. They weren't just changing my system, they were destroying it. I knew then what was coming, and I knew I needed to be prepared. 2 days later, the axe fell. I was summoned to Marcus's office, where he and Astrid waited for me, both dressed in flowing white garments that made them look like members of a cult, which, I supposed, they effectively were. Harper, Marcus began, his voice gentle but firm. We've been sensing for some time that your energy is no longer aligned with Lucid Pathworks' evolving consciousness. I remained silent, watching him struggle through the New Age termination speech he'd clearly rehearsed. Your vibration, Astrid added softly, creates discord in our collective field. Your attachment to rigid structures blocks the free flow of intuitive innovation. You're firing me, I said flatly, cutting through the mystical jargon. Marcus winced at my directness. We prefer to see it as releasing you to find a path more resonant with your personal frequency. Your skills are valuable, Harper. But Lucid is moving in a different direction, one that requires open channels to higher guidance. Higher guidance, I repeated. You mean replacing data-driven decision-making with Astrid's intuition? Astrid smiled serenely. All data is ultimately energy, Harper. I'm simply reading it in its purest form, unfiltered by the limitations of logical processing. I looked between them, these people who had lost their minds and were now casting me out for the sin of remaining sane. I built Centra from nothing. 14 years of my life went into that system. It's the reason this company is worth what it is today. And we honor your contribution, Marcus said, sliding a document across his desk. We've prepared a generous separation package, 6 months' salary, extended benefits, and we're not enforcing your non-compete clause. You're free to work wherever you choose. I glanced at the document without touching it. And Centra, who will manage the system once I'm gone. Astrid will be taking over as spiritual architect, Marcus said, as if this were a perfectly normal job title. She'll be working with the development team to guide Centra toward its next evolutionary phase. I almost laughed. Astrid couldn't write a line of code if her life depended on it, but I kept my face impassive as I finally picked up the separation agreement. I'll have my lawyer review this, I said, standing up. I assume I should pack my things today. Marcus nodded, looking relieved that I wasn't making a scene. HR will assist you, and Harper, I do wish you well on your journey forward. I left his office without another word, the separation document clutched in my hand. As I walked through the open office space toward my desk, I felt the eyes of my colleagues following me. Some looked embarrassed, others curious, a few even sympathetic. But no one spoke to me. No one protested. They'd all been thoroughly indoctrinated into Astrid's reality distortion field. I packed my personal items mechanically, the awards I'd received for my work on Centra, the photographs of my team during happier times, the small cactus that had somehow survived 14 years of neglect on my windowsill. An HR representative hovered nearby, ostensibly to assist, but really to ensure I didn't take anything I shouldn't. As I was closing my backpack, Jake appeared beside my desk. This isn't right, he said quietly, genuine distress in his eyes. You created Centra. You taught all of us. I appreciated his sentiment, but it was too little. Too late. And yet you said nothing in all those meetings where Astrid dismantled everything we built. He looked down, ashamed. I didn't realize how far it would go. I thought it was just corporate wellness stuff. Well, now you know, I said, zipping my bag closed. Good luck maintaining the system without me. You're going to need it. I walked out of Lucid Pathworks for the last time at 11:42 a.m. on a rainy Thursday. No farewell party, no goodbye speeches, no acknowledgement of 14 years of dedication. Just the quiet hiss of the automatic doors closing behind me. That night, in my apartment, I opened a bottle of expensive scotch I'd been saving for a special occasion. Being fired from the company I'd helped build seemed to qualify, albeit not in the way I'd imagined. I poured myself 2 fingers, sat down at my desk, and booted up my old personal laptop, the one I'd used during Centra's earliest development days. I still had my original copies of the system architecture, the foundational code that had grown into the sophisticated AI now managing global supply chains. I also had something else, a hidden backdoor I'd built into the system years ago as an emergency failsafe. I'd never intended to use it, had almost forgotten about it. But Lucid's security team had never found and removed it during their audits. I sipped my scotch, considering my options. The professional thing would be to walk away cleanly, take my severance, find a new position at a company that valued empirical evidence over mystical intuition, and leave Lucid to suffer the consequences of their choices. But as I reviewed the recent changes to Centra changes, I could still see through my backdoor access a cold anger settled in my chest. They weren't just mismanaging my creation, they were mutilating it, stripping away its precision, its reliability, its integrity, all in service to Astrid's delusional vision of intuitive technology. I opened another window on my laptop and began typing. If they wanted to destroy Centra, they'd have to do it without my help and without the system itself. Over the next 3 days, I barely slept. I subsisted on coffee, protein bars, and cold determination as I executed my plan. First, I created a secure, encrypted copy of Centra's original architecture and all its data, preserving what I'd built before Astrid's improvements could completely corrupt it. Then, I systematically began removing my access fingerprints from Lucid systems, covering my tracks while maintaining the backdoor I'd need for the final step. On the third night, at 2:18 a.m., when system usage was at its lowest, I activated a protocol that silently, elegantly transferred control of Centra from Lucid servers to a secure cloud instance I controlled. To anyone monitoring the system, it would appear as a routine maintenance operation, nothing unusual. But when completed, the version of Centra running at Lucid would be nothing but a hollow shell, its critical components and data now residing solely on my secured servers. I wasn't stealing the system, not exactly. The intellectual property legally belonged to Lucid, but I was ensuring that if they wanted to continue destroying what I'd built, they'd have to start from scratch. The elegant, efficient, rational system I'd created would be preserved, safe from Astrid's mystical meddling. As the transfer completed, I poured myself another scotch and watched the progress bar reach 100%. Then I implemented the final phase, a cascading deletion of all backup copies of the original Centra architecture stored on Lucid's servers. By morning, there would be nothing left but the hollow, spiritually enhanced version. Astrid had been creating a system that would catastrophically fail within days without the core components I'd removed. I closed my laptop at dawn, exhausted but satisfied. I'd done what was necessary to protect my life's work. Whether that made me a thief or a preservationist was a philosophical question I was too tired to contemplate. I finally fell into a deep sleep, dreamless and absolute. I was awakened at 11:27 a.m. by my phone exploding with notifications, texts, emails, missed calls, all from former colleagues at Lucid. I ignored them, silencing my phone and rolling over to go back to sleep. Whatever crisis they were experiencing wasn't my problem anymore. They had their spiritual advisor to guide them through it. When I finally checked my messages that evening, the situation became clear. Centra had completely collapsed. The system was returning nonsensical predictions, failing to process client data, and generally behaving like the hobbled, gutted entity it now was. Lucid's support team was overwhelmed with complaints from major clients whose supply chains were suddenly in chaos. The company's stock had dropped 17% in a single day as news of the technical failures spread. And no one, not the development team, not the system's administrators, and certainly not Astrid with her energy readings, could figure out what had happened or how to fix it. I should have felt guilty. These were companies that depended on Centra for their operations, real businesses with real people who would be affected by the disruption. But I couldn't summon any remorse. Lucid had made their choice when they dismissed empirical reality in favor of mystical nonsense. Now they were facing the consequences of that choice. Over the next week, I watched from a distance as Lucid Pathworks descended into chaos. Their PR team released vague statements about system upgrades and temporary service interruptions, but their major clients weren't buying it. Several announced they were exploring alternative solutions. The stock continued to fall. Meanwhile, I was busy. Using the preserved version of Centra, I began building something new, a streamlined, enhanced system without the bloat and mystical modifications Astrid had introduced. I called it Arclight, and I designed it to be everything Centra had been at its best: logical, efficient, reliable, and grounded in actual computer science rather than spiritual mumbo-jumbo. I also reached out to several former Lucid employees who had left during Astrid's tenure, people who, like me, had been pushed out for being too rigid or energetically discordant. They were talented engineers and data scientists who understood the value of evidence-based decision-making, and they were eager to join a project that respected their expertise. 10 days after Centra's collapse, I received an unexpected visitor. Jake Chen stood awkwardly at my apartment door, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "How did you find me?" I asked, not inviting him in. Zoe gave me your address, he admitted. Harper, it's a disaster. Nothing works. We've tried everything. Astrid conducted a 3-day energy healing ceremony in the server room, and the system just got worse. Despite everything, I almost laughed at the image. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not, he said, and for the first time, I heard real frustration in his voice. And maybe you shouldn't be. Things have gotten weird. Astrid has everyone wearing special crystals when they code. Marcus is talking about digital reincarnation. They're trying to rebuild Centra based on Astrid's visions, but it's just garbage. Actual garbage. I leaned against the doorframe. What do you want from me, Jake? He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Help us fix it. Come back. Marcus is desperate. He'll give you whatever you want. Title, money, complete control. And Astrid, Jake hesitated. She's still there. She says the system is spiritually rejecting the changes, whatever that means. But Marcus is starting to question her methods. I shook my head. I'm not coming back to that environment. Not for any title or any amount of money. Then what do you want? He asked, desperation in his voice. 3 clients have already canceled their contracts. If we can't fix this, Lucid is finished. I studied him for a moment. This brilliant engineer who had so easily abandoned reason for mysticism and now wanted me to save him from the consequences. I don't want anything from Lucid, I said finally. But I'll tell you this in 2 weeks. There will be an alternative solution available for companies affected by Centra's spiritual journey. Jake's eyes widened as he understood. You're building a competitor. I'm preserving what I created, I corrected him. Before it was corrupted by crystal waving and chakra aligning. He was quiet for a moment, processing this. Can I see it? No, I said simply. But if you ever get tired of coding based on astrological charts, send me your resume. I might have a position for a software engineer who remembers how to think critically. After Jake left, I returned to my work with renewed focus. Arclight was taking shape faster than I'd anticipated, thanks to the talented team I'd assembled and the clean, uncorrupted foundation we were building upon. We worked remotely, efficiently, without a single meditation session or energy alignment ritual to distract us. 2 weeks later, exactly as I'd promised Jake, Arclight launched quietly into the market. We didn't need flashy advertising or elaborate press releases. We simply reached out directly to Centra's former clients' companies now desperate for a reliable solution to replace the failing system they'd depended on. Our pitch was simple. Arclight offered the stability and accuracy of Centra at its best, with enhanced features and none of the mystical modifications that had compromised its performance. We could migrate their data seamlessly, with minimal disruption to their operations. Within 48 hours, 3 of Lucid's largest clients had signed contracts with Arclight Systems. Within a week, that number had grown to 7. The exodus was swift and decisive, a market referendum on the value of data-driven technology over spiritual intuition. Lucid's response was chaotic and ineffective. Marcus issued public statements accusing me of corporate espionage and theft of intellectual property claims that his legal team quickly walked back when they realized they had no evidence to support them. Astrid led a televised distance healing ceremony for Centra, which became an internet meme almost immediately. Their stock continued to plummet. Then something unexpected happened. A video began circulating online footage from one of Astrid's mandatory aura testing sessions at Lucid. In it, I stood rigidly as Astrid waved her hands around me, declaring that my energy field is dense with logical constructs that block creative flow, and that I was spiritually incompatible with Centra's evolutionary path. The video had been anonymously uploaded, but I suspected Zoe or one of the other junior developers who had grown disillusioned with Lucid's new direction. Whatever the source, its impact was immediate and devastating. Technology publications picked it up, running stories with headlines like, "Tech company replaces lead engineer based on aura reading," and "When Silicon Valley embraces pseudoscience, the Lucid path works" story. The professional backlash was severe. Major investors began questioning Marcus's leadership. The board called an emergency meeting, and through it all, Centra continued to deteriorate, hemorrhaging clients to ArcLight and other competitors. I could have spoken out publicly, given interviews, written exposés, further damaged Lucid's already tarnished reputation. But I chose silence. I didn't need to add fuel to the fire consuming the company I had once helped build. The facts spoke for themselves, and the market was rendering its verdict more effectively than any public statement I could make. Instead, I focused on ArcLight. Our team grew quickly as more talented engineers fled Lucid's increasingly toxic environment. We established offices in a converted warehouse in southeast Portland, an open, airy space with plenty of natural light, comfortable workstations, and not a stick of incense or crystal in sight. Our company culture was based on clear communication, evidence-based decision-making, and respect for expertise. We held regular code reviews, not energy alignment sessions. We tracked system performance with metrics and data, not intuitive readings. And we thrived. 3 months after I walked out of Lucid Pathworks, news broke that Marcus had been placed on administrative leave by the board. Astrid's profile disappeared from the company website overnight. There were rumors of a potential acquisition by a larger tech firm, a fire sale to salvage what remained of Lucid's once valuable assets. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only a quiet vindication. The universe they so often invoked had indeed established balance, but through the logical consequences of their actions, not mystical intervention. On a rainy afternoon, much like the one when I'd first met Astrid, I received an email from Richard Chen, my former mentor and ally who had escaped Lucid before the worst of the chaos. Dinner was all it said, followed by the name of a restaurant we'd frequented in the early days of Lucid. We met that evening in a quiet corner booth. Richard looked rested, younger somehow. The stress lines that had marked his face during his final days at Lucid now softened. "You look well," I observed as we settled in with our drinks. "Retirement suits me," he replied with a small smile. "I've been doing some consulting work, but mostly I've been sailing, something I never had time for before." We chatted about inconsequential things for a while, the unusually wet spring, a new Thai restaurant he'd discovered, my new office space. Eventually, though, the conversation turned to the elephant in the room. "I heard about Lucid," Richard said, swirling the wine in his glass. "The acquisition rumors." I nodded. "Seems likely, not much left to salvage at this point. And ArcLight is thriving, from what I hear, picking up clients left and right." "We're doing well," I acknowledged, "building something sustainable, something based on reality." Richard was quiet for a moment, studying me. "I owe you an apology, Harper. I should have fought harder, should have stood up to Marcus and his spiritual advisor." I shook my head. "You tried to warn me, and you got out clean." "Still," he said, "I left you to face it alone. That wasn't right." "Water under the bridge," I assured him. "We're both in better places now." He raised his glass in a toast. To better places, and to systems built on logic rather than crystal energy. I clinked my glass against his, allowing myself a genuine smile for the first time in months. As we continued our dinner, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had led me here. I had lost a company I helped build, a system I had created from nothing, and colleagues I had once respected. But I had gained something too, a new beginning, a team that shared my values, and the freedom to build technology according to principles I believed in. ArcLight would never be perfect. No system is. But it would be grounded in reality, in evidence, in the painstaking work of actual computer science. It would evolve through careful testing and validation, not through mystical intuition or energy readings. And perhaps most importantly, it would serve its purpose helping real businesses manage their operations efficiently and reliably, without New Age nonsense or pseudoscientific interference. As for Lucid Pathworks and Astrid Moonfall, I wished them no ill. The universe, or more accurately, the market had already rendered its judgment. I didn't need to add my voice to that verdict. Instead, I would do what I had always done best: build systems that worked. not because they vibrated at the right frequency or aligned with cosmic energies, but because they were designed with precision, maintained with care, and grounded in the beautiful, reliable logic of mathematics and computer science. Some might call that rigid thinking. I called it integrity. And in the end, integrity had prevailed not through revenge or retribution, but through the quiet, inexorable power of reality asserting itself. The rain continued to fall outside the restaurant window, washing the city clean. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new systems to build. And I was ready for them all, barefoot crystal wavers notwithstanding.